All right, my friends, Brian here with VetteSource, checking in today on a perfect day for my experiment that I wanted to finish up. This kind of a two-part video I started with a few months ago back, where we talked about the cooling systems on the C4 Corvette, the complex cooling systems, if you will. So what I've done today is I pulled out both LT4s here so that we could actually show this test and show you guys exactly how your C4 is supposed to be running. Now, for those of you that haven't been viewing any of my videos before, of course, this is our 1996 LT4 Corvette 6-speed manual with 23,000 miles on it. And this one is our 1996 LT4 Corvette 6-speed. Of course, they're all 6 speeds. And this is the Aqua Metallic car with 135,000 miles on it. Now, what I've done today to kind of illustrate how these Corvettes are supposed to run and what temperature settings you're supposed to run at was I left these cars outside. Today being towards the end of August, on July, it is 100 degrees outside, still at 6 o'clock. We're getting a little bit of a what am I trying to say, a breeze, but it's still super hot outside. I've let these cars heat soak in the driveway for the last 3 hours, and they're running right now. You can actually hear them running. I'll let them get up to speed. So what I'm going to do is show you the correct, or what these cars do as far as their on-off fan speeds and what temperature these get executed at, or what the computer tells the car to turn the fans off and turn them back on again. Now, I know that there's a lot of argument with this over the years. People have simply gone back and forth at each other's throats. My Corvette shouldn't run this hot, this doesn't run this hot. I'm going to tell you straight up from the factory, these run alarmingly close to the edge of overheating. It's just the way they're designed. They obviously decided after, thousands of hours of testing and millions of dollars in research that that was the best way to run these cars at the time. And not only that, they actually are better, cleaner fuel burn, because they burn all the fuel, the excess hydrocarbons off as well. So let's get started. What we're going to do is I'm going to show you guys both these cars, a low mileage car there, a high mileage car here, and show you exactly the temperature that these fans are going to kick on these cars. So let's start with the low mileage car first. Now, again, if you haven't been with me, these cars are completely unmodified. There's nothing that's been changed on them. In fact, the Aqua car still even has its original spark plug wires on it. So you can hear, obviously this one, our fan is running because I've got the AC commanded on. And both of them have a little quirk about them. This one, the off button won't work on my AC controller, so I've just left it on. And this one, the compressor's bad, so I've got to, even though it's technically on, it's still not running the clutch on the compressor itself. So I'm gonna lift the hood here. There's a blast of hot air coming out of this. Again, completely original car. So let's look at this yellow one and see what it's done. I've let these sit here and run in the driveway for the last 15 or 20 minutes. So let's see where they're at, okay? So this one is not cooperating. So right now we're at 200 degrees, as you can see right there. And it's running a lot cooler than I thought it would. Oh, you know what? I bet you why. Let's see if I can get it to work. There we go. Now what you'll see in a second here, did you hear that fan turned off? So now it'll heat up again. So let's go back. We'll actually start with the Aqua car, and I'll show you how it cycles back and forth. So the Aqua car has no fans running at the time, okay? So as you can see right here, now again, our manual, our analog gauge is down right now because we broke that temperature sensor a few weeks ago when we changed that oxygen sensor out in the car. I'm gonna let you watch and see this. So we're at 225 right now, 224. So I've got a fan on here. I've got the driver's side primary fan is on and it's spinning, because you can tell the temperature is actually creeping down, and we're at 100 degrees temperature outside. This is normal. So let's see what we do. We got 223. And our oil temperature is still under 215. Now, I did pick on this day on purpose because I knew it was going to be scorching hot today. I mean, it's hot enough you can't even sit down on the concrete without grilling your butt through your pants. So, and this is one of those particular things that is just a function of living down here up north. I know you do get some warmth in the summertime, but nowhere near kind of what the southern states, especially near the coastlines, get as far as heat and humidity coupled together. So it looks like right now, I'm kind of laughing because these two cars are going to punk me today. They're not going to do what I want them to do, obviously. So, okay, you can see there, the fan brought it down to 221. Now it's also cooling it off a little bit slower too, simply because it's hot outside. Now, there's another feature of what we're doing here. This is probably the worst conditions you can think of for your C4 Corvette, because it's not moving and there's no airflow going through the front radiator of these cars. There's the garage doors blocking the yellow car, and the yellow car is blocking the aqua car. So we're stuck at 221 right now. Normally what this car does, there we go, 220, it will take it right back down to around 217, which I'm sitting here waiting for it to show us this. But again, it's taking a little bit longer just because it's hotter outside. Now the other thing too is that a Corvette is different from some of the other cars of this era that have two electric cooling fans. A lot of the cars run both fans at the same time with a low speed and a high speed. The F-bodies, or in particular, do that. The Corvette, each fan is dedicated to a particular function. So the left fan is strictly for normal cooling. The right fan is for cooling with the air conditioning on or under a load, over certain temperature expectations, or so over certain temperatures. So versus the F-bodies, you'll see there's a low speed and a high speed. On the Corvettes, the fans are either an on or an off, one or the other, or both together in conjunction. That's why you can hear the fan on the yellow car. Okay, now we're at 217. Now watch what happens. It's cooled it off to 217. I just heard the relay click. Our fan went off. Of course, for those of you that don't get to experience it, those are the cicadas in the background making all the noise in the trees. You can actually tell. Now see, we've jumped already to 219. So the cicadas make a racket during the summertime, in addition to the lovely freeway I live next to. But that's the joy of living in the city. 220. Now this one will get right up to about between 227 and 230. 223. 224. 225. 227. 228. And again, you'll notice there are no lights on the dash telling me that there's a problem, that we're overheating. We're at 230. And watch what happens here. Our fan has just come on. Our number one fan on the only speed that it has. It's holding at 230. I'm going to wait for it to start coming back down so you can see what happens. There you go, 228. So, the range on this car with 135,000 miles on it, with nothing changed, original parts except for that radiator hose. Right now I'm running distilled water in it. The temperature range without the AC on is 217 to 230, right? Okay. So, we're going to go ahead, we're going to turn this car off just because. Okay, my friends, here we are in the yellow car, and of course, you know, again, it's hot when the phone's camera turns off all on its own. So we're going to sit here. We're going to leave the air conditioning off on this car. Now, this car just really wants to run cooler, regardless of other factors. But yeah, at the end there, when I pulled the phone out of the other car, the camera turned off because the phone had overheated from being inside the car. So let's kind of look at this for a minute. It's slowly going back up again, but you can see obviously we have no lights on the dash. Now you can see also, one thing that really freaks people out is this analog gauge here for the temperature on these cars isn't really entirely accurate. In fact, from the factory, there's a sticker that's on here that always gets lost. It was even pulled off this one. It actually warns you these are not a linear gauge, so they're not going to be exactly correct. Your correct gauge reading, of course, is you come over here and you'll select gauges. It'll tell you how many volts the system's pushing. It'll tell you your oil temperature, and it will tell you your coolant temperature. So this is the early, well, not that early, but the DIC panel of the mid-90s. The Lincolns actually had that, I think all the way back in 84. The Cadillacs and Lincolns started that trend really early. And the Corvettes did too, the DIC panel in 84 C4. So this is kind of a second generation of it. So you can see here, we're at 217, 219, and we're climbing. I have no AC on or anything else, and I really don't want to sweat all over the inside of this car because it's so clean. But anyway, I'll clean it up. So we're at 220. So let's watch and see what this thing does and see how closely it matches the other one. So we're at 222. Kind of getting away where I can see. 223. Now again, we're up against the garage door and we have no airflow coming to the front of this car. 224. Now this still has its original Dex Cool in it, but I really need to change it because it's old. 225. 227. Now watch what happens. 228. And you can see even our gauge is very close to that line we don't like. So we've hit 230. Now watch what happens. Up, 231, 230, 231. It's trying to decide what it wants to do. That'll be interesting if this car overheats and the other one doesn't. Let's see what it's going to do. $230. Wait, I'm hoping to not overheat the phone here again. Get some airflow across it. There we go. 228. So you can tell that primary cooling fan is on. I do not have the secondary cooling fan on, which means, it just means in simple terms, I don't have the AC turned on. And of course it does not want to cool down that quickly because there's no airflow coming across this. It's even more restricted than, say, the other one. So you see we're at 227. And our gauge is coming back just a little bit off that danger zone. But this is what freaks people out. If you've never had a Corvette before of this era, you were immediately trying to figure out what's going on with it. So we're at 225. And what's going to happen, it's going to go all the way back down to 217 again, just like it did before. So what I'm going to do right now, just to save ourselves the aggravation, is I'm going to go ahead and turn the AC back on, which is going to kick on our secondary cooling fan yet again. And you can hear that come on. These fans on these are secondary fans extremely loud. The primary one's not very loud. So you see already we're at 224 with that extra boost of that secondary fan in place there. And very shortly, there we go, we've got our airflow coming out of our primary vents, which I need to start driving this more because the buttons are sticking on the AC controller. But anyway, 223. Honestly, guys, this is the nicest car cosmetically I've ever had in my fleet of cars running through inventory in my business, and I don't really like driving it that much. 221, just because I don't want to mess it up. Plus, this car has a really cool backstory that I haven't gotten into yet, but I'll share that one day. 221, and we are at, I'm waiting for that magic number. So, $220. This one's taking a little bit longer to get back down again. My might be because I've got the AC on. There we go, 219. So it's actually creating more of a drag, putting more load on the engine as it is. But you can see we have separation of only a couple of months. This car, that car there, the Aqua Metallic car was built in September of 95. This car was built in December of 95. You can see there's very little separation between how these are functioning. And of course, here we go right now. I can turn the AC off. And there we are at 217. Now watch what'll happen. And there the fans both turned off. Kind of pumped it back down to 216. Now watch, if I'm not mistaken, it will slowly climb its way back up again. Now I have to admit, when I first acquired the car last year, the first couple times I drove it, again, looking at the linear gauges, I had forgotten, because I've been so long in the teardown end of the business and I hadn't really driven a low mileage car around in a while. I was kind of myself going, hey, wait a minute. I had to second guess and go, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot. These run so close to overheating that it gets uncomfortably warm. Now see, here we go. We're at 216 and it really just doesn't want to move at this point. So it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, right? I don't think it's going to climb. So here we go. Rather than waste any more time, you guys saw what I was trying to illustrate. We're at a range during the summer of 217 to 230. Regardless of whether or not you've got AC commanded. So that's exactly what they're supposed to do factory. Now, because everybody likes to argue about what the Corvettes are supposed to run, my Corvette ran too hot, it shouldn't have ever run that hot, and I don't care what anybody tells me. I mean, I've heard it all, right? I've heard every excuse in the book for bypassing the electric fans to turn them on manually, turn the relays on manually, and I've dismantled probably 24 Corvettes that have burned to the ground because guys were stubborn enough to ground their cooling fan relay, and then rather than put an inline fuse in it, they ran them straight. So we're going to go directly to the book. So if you can see here, we're looking at electric cooling fan contents. This is for 1991 and back. This is 1991, which would be an L98. This is 1994, so it applies to 96, 94 through 96. Now what's funny is that this section is really almost similar. They just rewrote it, and then they've made a mistake in the service manual. They've got this VIN J. There was no VIN J in 90. Oh, I'll take that back. Now this is from 94, so the VIN J would be applicable. So anyway, let's go back into, we'll start with 94 through 96. So if we go right here to primary cooling fan, it shows you the primary cooling fan is controlled by ECM based on inputs, right? So the ECM turns the primary cooling fan on with these conditions set, and look at that. The engine coolant temperature sensor shows above 226 degrees or 108 degrees Celsius. So you can see that as soon as that thing got to 230 on the gauge, it actually turned on the cooling fan, right? And then what it did, if you ever get your engine oil temperature over 228, it's going to turn it on. Now, what it does is, once the primary fan has been turned on by the ECD, the ECM will turn it off when that temperature's dropped about 9 degrees. So if we take 9 degrees from 226, we're back at 217 or 99 degrees Celsius, which is exactly what this car did, and it's exactly what the Aqua car did. They turned themselves on around 227 to 230. I'm figuring actually they turned themselves on more at 227, and it climbed until 230 before it recovered. And of course, your secondary cooling fan here, what it does is if it shows the engine coolant temperature sensor above 100 degrees Celsius or 234 degrees, then it will turn the fan on. And of course, the same thing, it lowers it by about 9 degrees. Now, if you're thinking that maybe that's just the LT1 cars, 94 and up, let's look at this one. So the same thing, right? Primary cooling fan operates under the following conditions, and it's actually even got more parameters it operates on. So this would be L98 cars from 85 to 91. So if the vehicle speed sensor is below 12 miles per hour, we're at 226 when the fan turns on, off at 217. There's that 217 number again. With the vehicle speed sensor above 12 miles per hour, 234, and then off at 229. Now that's of course if you're considering you're driving down the road, so you got airflow coming across there. With RPM below 3,500, oil temperature above 109 or 228, It comes on at 228 degrees, off at 225, and the RPM above 3,500, 219 and 216. Now that would be obviously at freeway speed. So same thing on the secondary fan. Like I said, it turns on usually only when the AC is commanded on. Same kind of numbers, 234 above 12 miles, below 12 miles an hour, off at 225, above 12, 239, 228, and then oil temperature 228, 235. So it's really interesting that, you know, again, I find myself, I talk to probably a dozen people a day about these cars, and it's the same thing I always tell people. If you're going to have one of these cars, find a factory service manual for it, because the factory service manuals, even back then, are thousands of pages, and they'll give you tons of information about what these cars are supposed to be doing. Now, I did this because, of course, I'm like everybody. I love YouTube and the ability to show what's going on and what's happening in real time versus reading it. I get it, I understand it, but I figured I'd bring this to you because it's hotter than hell outside. I'm sweating my butt off right now, and it would be fun to do. The other thing I noticed while I was doing this is our compressor's wiped out on this car, so that's going to be another fun video for us to do as I change the AC system. It's just leaking all over the place. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and cut things off today. I've been talking enough. I need to go back in and get some water again. Wait for the sun to go down, and I will catch up with you guys next week, man. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll have some more goodies next week for us to look at. Okay, so I'll see y'all then. Thanks again.